Thank you, Richard, for that very gracious introduction. Thank you for your outstanding leadership to the Minnesota Business Partnership and also as one of the great civic leaders of our community. Yesterday morning, we were together in blue jeans at the governor's residence. We spruced up a bit for tonight, but that's an indication of the incredible dedication that you have for the causes to which you're committed. Richard's right, I was a hockey goalie back in the days when my sons say we used dinosaur bones for goalie sticks. One of our staunchest supporters back there at Yale University was Governor Jeb Bush's older brother, the President George Bush, who was good friends with one of the Minnesotans, Jack Morrison, who was a college All-American for Yale. The president was also president of our fraternity at Yale, which led me to say that back then he and I were often in the same party. But thank you very much for the invitation to speak with you tonight. However, I learned a long time ago that when I'm slated to speak just before dinner, the underlying message is, be brief. I say never stand between an audience and the bar, the buffet, or the bathroom. I won't tonight. I join you in welcoming Governor Jeb Bush back to Minnesota. I had the chance to meet with the governor shortly after taking office in 2011. Our discussion about K-12 education reform was very timely and very beneficial. We took inspiration from his leadership to have all Florida school children read at or above grade level by the end of third grade. That spring, Republican and Democratic legislators and my administration worked together to design and pass a similar initiative. Almost half of our state's elementary schools now use the RTI system to identify children's reading levels at the beginning of the school year and to monitor their gains throughout the year. That's a big increase from 2 years ago. And in 2 more years, I want it to be 100%. We've made other important education reforms. We've greatly increased state funding to provide early childhood scholarships for young kids. And we have adopted the quality rating system, Parent Aware, developed by Dwayne Benson and his organization, the Minnesota Early Learning Foundation, which was supported by many of you in the business partnership. Tragically, at the same time we're expanding our state early learning program, the federal government's sequestration is drastically reducing funding for the Head Start program. Nearly 1,000 Minnesota children will be among the 60,000 kids from low-income families nationwide who will not benefit from an early start at Head Start this year. Last spring, we became the 11th state to fund all-day kindergarten for all Minnesota children, beginning next fall. Last year, only half of our children had the advantage of free all-day kindergarten. Next year, that percentage will double. Studies show that children who attend full-day kindergarten programs learn 40 to 50% more in literacy and mathematics than those in half-day programs. And they are especially beneficial to children from low-income families. For years, critics of Minnesota's public schools have complained about the lack of teacher evaluations. In 2011, the legislature enacted both principal and teacher evaluations. My terrific education commissioner, Brenda Casilius, and her team worked with interested parties to design one of the most advanced and comprehensive teacher and principal evaluation systems in the country. This is the first full year of implementation for the principal evaluation, and our teacher evaluation is now in its trial year. Teacher evaluations are based 1/3 on classroom observations, 1/3 on student ratings, and 1/3 on test score results. Next year, they become mandatory for all Minnesota teachers. I could go on all night about the important improvements we have made to our state's public schools, colleges, and universities during the past 3 legislative sessions, but then you'd miss dinner. Legislators from both parties played important leadership roles and deserve to share the credit for raising the standards for students, teachers, principals, achievement, and testing. Our school children deserve still better, and they're going to get it. I hope that we'll have also a reasoned discussion about Minnesota's economic future. I realize that most of you are unhappy with my raising some taxes to balance the state's budget last spring. I was just as unhappy about the need to do so. It's easy to forget that when I came into office in January 2011, we faced a projected state budget deficit for the next biennium of $6.2 billion. We owed our school districts over $2 billion. So legislators and I went to work. We made over $2 billion in permanent spending cuts during the 2011 session. In total, we reduced state expenditures for the fiscal years 2012 and 13 by almost $4 billion from what was originally forecast to what actually occurred. Then, fortunately, the national economy started to improve, and Minnesota's economy has improved even more. Our state's GDP increase in 2012 was the fifth best among all 50 states. Our median household income is 15% higher than the national average. And there are now 122,200 more Minnesotans working today than there were when I took office. As a result, the state's fiscal condition improved dramatically during the past 2 years. If my administration had been given a clean slate when we arrived, there would have been no need to raise anyone's taxes last spring, and we could still have made our additional commitments to education, economic development incentives, public safety, and lower property taxes. Instead, by state law, that entire surplus went to pay off the school debt. But there's good news ahead. Under current trends, our state's economic future looks even better. The most recent state budget forecast projects that we will start the next biennium beginning July 1st, 2015, with a $728 million surplus. We'll have to wait for a few more budget forecasts, check current economic conditions, and see if the federal government has reopened by then. But if they're all favorable, and if I'm in office, I want to devote much of that surplus to serious tax reductions. I don't expect you to believe this. Just remember it. Thank you. I'm very optimistic about our state's future. Our strong economic performance says to me that there's a lot right about Minnesota. And there's a lot that's going to get even better. This is a bad time to talk about a new football stadium, but it will be much better when thousands of Minnesotans are working to build it, and when many more are working on Ryan's mixed-use development right next to it, with more to come. Recent problems notwithstanding, I am grateful to the Viking owners for renewing their commitment to Minnesota, as I am to 3M for their decision to build a new research and development facility in Maplewood, to Toro for deciding to expand their corporate headquarters in Bloomington, to Shutterfly for selecting Shakopee over Wisconsin for their new Midwest operation, and to countless other companies for expressing their faith in our shared future by creating jobs for 122,000 more Minnesotans. I'm deeply grateful to Mayo Clinic's leaders for their decision to locate their exciting destination medical center in Rochester. The eager partnerships offered by our state, county, and city governments were important factors, they say, in their decision. This development will continue Mayo's world preeminence, transform downtown Rochester, and create thousands more construction and healthcare jobs. It will be well led by my superb Chief of Staff, Tina Smith. One of my next priorities is to work with University of Minnesota President Eric Kaler to return the U's medical school to its former national prominence. A transformed university medical school and a new destination medical center in Rochester would establish Minnesota as the Silicon Valley for healthcare innovation and medical technology. We are already blessed with a growing number of new and expanding technology companies. This sector can become a key cornerstone of our state's economic future. In closing, I understand that we may not always agree on the best ways to improve Minnesota's education system or business climate. It saddens me to hear some of the carping about Minnesota's supposed failings, especially when those attacks ignore the positives and exaggerate the negatives. Minnesota deserves better. I'm proud of this state. I was born here. I've lived here most of my life. I intend to reside here and pay taxes here until I die. I've traveled all over this planet to some of its best spots and some of its worst, and I believe we're some of the luckiest people on it. I believe that Minnesota has better Republican leaders than most other states, better Democratic leaders, better business leaders, labor leaders, education leaders, and civic leaders. Most importantly, Minnesota has the best people, the smartest, most innovative, most productive people anywhere. Our citizens have worked harder than most others. We have invested better and spent smarter. We have earned our successes. We're not perfect. We should admit our shortcomings, fix them for the future, and always strive to improve. But let us also tout our strengths and celebrate our successes, at least as often and with as much enthusiasm as we do our problems. Minnesota deserves it. Thank you. Have a good night.